Hello Year 12. This week we're going to have a little look at the different factors involved in choosing an apprenticeship. So we'll go through the apprenticeship levels again and what areas that apprenticeships actually exist in. Then we're going to be looking at the economic factors involved in choosing an apprenticeship, so actually things you can't control but that you need to be aware of, particularly in the current climate. And then we're going to look a little bit at kind of how you can reflect on the personal factors that might affect your choice of apprenticeship, so what you're actually good at, what you're interested in. We're going to be doing this alongside the Student Apprenticeship Guide, which is a fantastic resource that's been developed by Amazing Apprenticeships. I've emailed that out to you. It's got a lot more detail on all the things I'm going to kind of cover in this presentation. It's got little kind of tasks to get you thinking, and it's got links to other online resources as well. So I really do recommend you work through that in your own time and make good use of that resource. So looking at the apprenticeship levels, a level that I didn't mention in my last presentation was level 2, and that's because it's GCSE level, it's repeating a qualification that you've done before. However, it might well be that for practical reasons, a level 2 apprenticeship comes up and you want to go for it, or it just really is the dream job for you at the moment. And there's nothing wrong with that. If there's a good reason why you want to go and do a level 2 apprenticeship, there's nothing to stop you. But it's just to be aware, obviously, it's a qualification level that you'd be repeating. What I expect most of you will probably focus on are the advanced and the higher apprenticeships. So a level 3 advanced apprenticeship is obviously equivalent to what you're currently studying. It's the same level as an A level. Some industries will require you to start on level 3. That'll be all they offer, or because of the skills involved, that they'll need you to start on the level 3 and work up. It's really useful as well if you kind of want to change direction. So perhaps, you've not quite taken the combination of A-levels that you wanted, or you've discovered that you've got a particular interest in something that's not related to your A-levels. So it's a good way to change direction by kind of repeating that qualification level. And the entry requirements are based on GCSEs, and there's an opportunity to do your maths and English again if you need to. So that can all be very useful when considering apprenticeships. The higher level apprenticeships are equivalent to a foundation degree, and indeed that might well be the qualification that you study. They'll look at your A-level grades, and they might also ask for some previous experience, which is nothing to be worried about. It's likely to be experience that you will be able to demonstrate, but it's just to be aware that that's going to form part of the application. There is also opportunities to progress through the different apprenticeship levels. So if you start on level 2 or you start on level 3, it might well be that you can progress up to levels 4 and 5 in the future. Degree apprenticeships are well worth considering. They are very competitive. They are likely to have applicants from a wider area, so that's obviously going to make them more competitive. So they're going to be looking at probably higher A-level grades, as well as slightly more experience, and for you to be able to really reflect on that experience a little bit more than perhaps the lower levels. They're also going to have more steps in the application process. So they're likely to have maybe a phone interview and a face-to-face interview. There might be an assessment centre or skills tests involved. So you need to be prepared for it being a lengthier application process. It can be a really good way of getting a degree without the debt, but it's not an easy way of getting a degree. You have to remember that you will be working and studying at the same time. That requires a great deal of motivation. It's worth just noting as well that higher levels do exist. There is a level 7 apprenticeship, but that's not likely to be something you'll be applying for now. It's more likely to be that that's a progression that you would move on to in the future, or you might go directly in at a level 7, but after you've worked in industry for a few years. They do exist, but it's not necessarily something you'll look at now. The different apprenticeship areas, there are a huge range of apprenticeships. I think there's something like 150 different apprenticeship areas. So it's really worth you working through that booklet, as I mentioned before, and just reading up on the different areas that apprenticeships exist in. It's also worth noting that big companies that take apprentices take them in a variety of different fields. So one of the examples that's given in the booklet is the company Coca-Cola. Obviously, they do things like food and drink development, but they also hire people in their, accounting and HR departments. So, a company will take on apprentices in lots and lots of different areas. Also in that booklet, there is a link to a card that breaks down which different areas offer apprenticeships at different levels. So obviously I mentioned before that degree apprenticeships are only offered in a certain number of areas. So it's quite useful if you've got your heart set on a degree apprenticeship to go and have a look at actually what areas that's offered in before you kind of get too far down the line. I think one of the big factors that you need to consider is actually what's available locally. Not all apprenticeships that exist in our local area. So it's really important to do a local job search and get a sense for what's, in demand in Durham, or slightly wider, further afield. And you will have to accept that some travel might be involved. So if you have your heart set on a certain type of apprenticeship, it might be that you go up to Newcastle, you travel down to Darlington, you go a little bit further afield. On Unifrog, obviously you can do an apprenticeship search and it will show you the different job vacancies. But also if you go onto the different careers library entries, it will show you the actual number of jobs that are available in Durham as well as nationally. So I'll show you that quickly now. So here we are in Unifrog, and if you have a little look at the careers library tool, just to be quick, sorry about that, I'm logged back in now. If you look at the Careers Library tool, I'll just choose one that I've previously favorited just for speed. You go to the different entry for the career that you're interested in, and when you scroll down, lots of information, and what you will find below the entry requirements is current UK jobs, and that also shows you the number of jobs actually here in Durham as well. Okay, so that's really worth bearing in mind as you start to look at different jobs and career profiles. What's the demand locally? Is this something that actually is available in our local area, or are you going to have to travel if that's your dream job? Other places that you can find out about our local job kind of demands for jobs. Obviously, you can look on local job sites, you can look in local newspapers, all those kind of more classic ways of searching for jobs. You'll find that in the bulletin that I send out on a fairly regular basis, I also link to an LMI, a local labour market information bulletin that gives you an idea about upcoming jobs in the area, and also reductions in jobs in the area that can be useful to know about as well. And in the booklet that I mentioned previously, there is a link to an apprenticeship vacancy snapshot that kind of shows you the big companies that are currently hiring. So there are also all areas that are worth looking at if you want to know what's available locally. It is worth considering national employers as well, particularly if you are interested in degree apprenticeships. And sometimes you can miss these in your searches. Unifrog is really good because actually it will always give you, even if you kind of put your postcode in and set it to just a few miles, it will always give you national kind of vacancies as well, which I find really helpful. But sometimes the Gov website, the gov.uk website misses national employers. So it's important that if you kind of know that there's a big recruiter that you want to look at, perhaps their head office, they've got a local business, but their head office is based somewhere else, and for whatever reason it's not coming up, you set your search to the whole of England and it will hopefully pick up on some of those national employers as well. And as I mentioned before, it may well be that they've got a head office that's not far from here, but so they've got a local office that's not far from here, but because their head office is based down south, that apprenticeship doesn't come up on a local search. So do make sure you bear that in mind as well. Really good sources, a couple more websites on there that will just highlight, you can't necessarily apply through those websites, but they will highlight big national employers. And again, it's another source of kind of interviews with people that have done apprenticeships there, videos, all that sort of thing. So they're worth having a look at in your own time. Reflecting on some of the personal factors that might be involved in choosing an apprenticeship. So obviously you want to be thinking about your skills and interests. It really frustrates me when people say they don't have any experience. I know you might not necessarily have formal work experience, but actually there's a whole lot that you will have done already in your life that will give you an idea about what you enjoy. So what have you done at school that you enjoy? What do you know that you're good at? How do you like to study? Are you practical? Are you quite good at written work? And starting to kind of reflect on those different things that might give you an idea about what career is good for you. For some of you, it will be quite easy to self-reflect in that way. Some of you might want a little bit of a help, and there's some really useful tools on Unifrog. If you go to the personality profile and the interests profile, it will give you a whole pile of questions. You work through in your own time answering those questions, and at the end it will give you a little bit of a profile, tell you a little bit about what that means for you, and match you to some jobs. Now, it's not perfect. You need to take the results with a bit of a pinch of salt, but it can be quite a good start to that self-reflection process and getting an idea for areas and jobs that might be good for you. Other personal factors to consider. How long do you want to study for? There's different apprenticeship levels, can take different lengths of time to complete. So are you wanting to commit to just 1 year of further study, or are you willing to study for much longer than that, which you will need to for something like a degree apprenticeship? How and where do you want to study? Do you like the idea of kind of being out on day release? Do you want to be spending a little bit more time in college, or do you want to be doing it all on the job? So having a look at what their training structure is like and what's going to suit you, because not all apprenticeships necessarily offer their training in the same way. Do you want to work for a big company, perhaps that's got branches all over the country or all over the world, and give you the opportunity to maybe move away in the future? Or would you like to work for somewhere small and local where, you know, you're going to get to know everybody that works in that business, and, you know, where actually if you do really well, that's going to be spotted quite quickly? What's the company's ethos, and does that matter to you? So, you know, what are their ethics? How do they represent their staff? You know, what kind of things are they involved in nationally? Because that might matter to you when you know about the opportunities, but also how you're going to be treated as an employee. What future opportunities does that company offer? So do they have management development opportunities? Do they have management schemes, talent schemes? You know, do they regularly give people the opportunity to kind of apply for other vacancies within the company? So it's worth just looking at where people have gone previously, where previous apprenticeships have moved on to. You know, what happens if you work in one department but like the idea of trying out some work in a different department? Is that something that they allow you to do? And as we've already mentioned, thinking about whether you're willing to travel or want to stay close to home, and how much the apprenticeship actually pays. We haven't talked about pay, but obviously that will be a factor in your choice. You know, do they pay enough for you to move away from home if it's not a local apprenticeship opportunity? So that is something that you'll need to look at. Obviously, the best way to decide on whether an apprenticeship is right for you is to get work experience in that area. Now, luckily, you guys have actually already done a week's worth of work experience. Some schools have had to cancel their work experience completely this year, but I know a lot of you are looking to get more. Please don't panic if you were hoping to get more work experience and haven't been able to. Companies will take that into account, and there's lots of other ways that you can do your research. So obviously volunteering, I know that there's still limited opportunities for that at the moment, but it might be something that opens up a little bit more before formal work experience. You can obviously talk to people that are already in that job, and we can maybe help put you in touch if you don't know anybody. And going online and listening to different talks. We're regularly sending through links to different online talks. Likewise, virtual work experience that comes up, we'll be sending through links to that as well. You might want to have a look at the online courses. There's obviously a search for those in Unifrog. I know this might seem a little bit more relevant to those looking at degrees, but it can again be a good way of getting an idea about whether you'd be willing to study something practical. And a lot of those online courses, there are lots of practical ones as well as sort of university degree subjects. That's worth having a look at. And also looking at whether the company that you're interested in runs any employment challenges. A lot of big businesses run kind of things for sixth form where they set you a real world problem to work on. This can be great because there can be prizes involved, but it also gives you a taste of the sort of work that company does. So this week's task, I'd like you to start work on that student booklet. As I said, there's no deadline to that. It's for you to work through in your own time, but it is well worth working through. Had we been in school, there'd be regular opportunities for you to talk to your tutor about your progress. So please do keep your tutors and myself up to date with how you're doing on that booklet. You'll see at the end of each section there's a page that says, I've spoken to my tutor about this, these are the questions I've got. So make use of that, make use of us to ask you questions and do your research. I'd like you to complete an apprenticeship shortlist on Unifrog. I know some of you have already done this, but it's worth repeating that exercise regularly to get an idea of what's currently available, because obviously the job market is ever changing, so you really need to do that, you know, every few weeks to get a sense of what's out there. So those tasks are for you to work on in your own time. There's not a deadline this week. And next week we'll be looking in more depth at actually the process of applying and what's involved in applying for apprenticeships. So until then, stay safe and good luck with your research.